stoke the flames of division and messages that we see to further weaponise Islamophobia in the region. Online communications is now part of every modern-day warfare. We regularly see states and leaders, not just Trump, use online propaganda as part of their arsenal. And on the flip side, Kashmiris' freedom of speech online is suffocated to the point that any criticism against the Indian government risks terrorism charges. So will the Minister commit to work internationally on the issue of online propaganda, fake news, the spread of racism, and the measures taken to silence news coming from Kashmir? The now decades-long fight for Kashmiris to determine their own future looks further from reality than ever before. I wish we were here to talk about what the future of Kashmir could look like, how their people could rightly shape and be in charge of their own destiny, what would come next. But given the current political situation in Jammu and Kashmir, it is clear that we are a long way from realising that hope. And until the people of Kashmir have the most fundamental of all human rights, which is to live safely and to be free from fear, we must and we will continue to stand with the people of Kashmir. And to Kashmiris, whether in Kashmir or in Luton North, you have not only my solidarity, but my enduring friendship and commitment to keep fighting until your human rights are protected now and in the future.
The question is that this House has considered the political situation in Kashmir. As people can see, there's 8 people on the list wishing to speak. I want to get to the front benches by as close to 5:10 as possible. So I'm going to start off with a limit of 5 minutes, which will probably have to be reduced, but I will start with 5 minutes. James Daly.
Thank you very much, Mr Davies. Can I first of all congratulate the Honourable Lady on securing this very important debate. Can I also say that I agree with absolutely every word that she said in respect of this. The voice of individual MPs in different parts of the country is so important. I have a large Kashmiri diaspora in my seat in Bury. Through the general election campaign, the most important issue for that section of my population, who are the friendliest, the most entrepreneurial, the most positive, decent people that I've had the pleasure to meet, was this issue of Kashmir. And it came back to this issue about human rights. And that's what I want to talk about today. The first speech that I wrote, Mr Davies, won't surprise you, was far too long and far too wordy, and it was a history lesson that we don't need to hear today. What we need to concentrate on here is this, in my view, is that this is a human rights issue. I was lucky enough, and I'm lucky enough, to be an officer of the APPG on Kashmir. And the APPG on Kashmir seems like a long time ago now, but in February, March of last year, went to Kashmir. I went with my honourable friend from Hyndburn behind me, Labour members also. And the reason why we went, and I hesitate to speak on behalf of my friend, is it is not enough in terms of my constituents. When I was speaking to them during the general election, in terms of saying, yes, I can read in a book about this, I wanted to go to the front line to actually ask people who are impacted and affected by this crisis and by this ongoing human rights disaster what was going on. We, as one example, we went to a refugee camp in Courtley, and we met, and I met, and all my parliamentary colleagues met, people who had suffered the most grievous injuries, who could tell, and we're talking about hundreds upon hundreds of people, not people who were just there in a queue provided by some political organisation, who told us as individuals that these appalling acts are happening. Now, my honourable friend, when she talks about the lockdown, is absolutely right. This is a lockdown that is not like our lockdown. This is a lockdown that it attacks the very fundamental rights that we all take for granted here. And as a country, the government, quite rightly, have expressed in the last few days their views on China's treatment of the Muslim population in that country. What we must do is take a similar stance, I believe, in respect of Kashmir. We must be putting the quite obvious human rights abuses at the top of our agenda. We have thousands of our fellow citizens who are from a Kashmiri background, who have family members there, who on a daily basis are impacted and affected by the acts that go on. I, as a lawyer, I've got a long list here of human rights abuses, but things like detention without trial. There are people in Kashmir who have been waiting 15 years for a trial. 15 years. And there's not a word from the international community in respect of this. Torture is commonplace. Young people disappearing. Yet we don't see this on the television screens of the Western world. We don't see this on the BBC. We saw recently, quite rightly, the issues in Hong Kong and other places. But Kashmir, these are people that we represent. These are our friends. This impacts their daily lives, and we must take a stand. So all I ask in respect of the very excellent Minister is, and I know that how committed he and this government is to standing up to human rights abuses throughout the world, that whatever our relationship with countries, whatever the political dimension to this, we cannot be deflected from the task of working with our international partners to come up with an appropriate way of protecting the interests of children. My friend, the appalling stories I've heard of rape and sexual violence against women, absolutely appalling. As an international community, working with our European partners, with President-elect Biden in America, we have the opportunity now, I think, to come up with an international programme through the United Nations which is going to give succour and hope to those poor people in Kashmir who for 70 plus years have been going through the most awful, appalling hell. Now there's always the temptation in all debates to blame this person, to blame that person. What I would like to finish off in my 30 seconds is say, we can draw a line in the sand here, we can join together on a cross-party basis, we can be united by our determination to help anti-Muslim persecution in Kashmir, we can be united in our desire to protect human rights wherever they are in the world, but certainly in this region, which is the geopolitical issues here, perhaps the most severe in the world, 2 nuclear powers, and therefore I welcome this debate. I know my government is committed to human rights, I know the Minister is, and I welcome and thank all colleagues for their contribution, and let's all stand and do this together again and again and again.
Barry Gardner.
Mr Davis, I welcome the opportunity to speak under your chairmanship on this important political situation in Kashmir debate. As a constitutional entity, the so-called Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which is better known to the world as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, is not just strange, it's unique. It's been given the trappings of a country with a president, a prime minister, and even a legislative assembly. But it's neither a country with its own sovereignty, nor is it a province with its own clearly defined devolved authority from the national government. Under Section 56 of the AJK Interim Constitution of 1974, the Pakistan government can dismiss any elected government in AJK, irrespective of the level of support it might have in that legislative assembly. Strangely enough, for an entity that purports to be a country, its constitution bars from public office and prohibits anyone from participating in politics unless they publicly support the principle of Jammu and Kashmir acceding to Pakistan. Imagine that. A country, all of whose politicians can only be politicians if they say they don't want to be a country. So it will be of little surprise to colleagues when I say that all the major civil and police administrative positions in AJK are held by Pakistani civil and military officers. It may also come as no surprise to find that this putative country does not have any representation in the Parliament of Pakistan. The territory's local representatives are excluded, not just from the Pakistan Parliament, but even from those Pakistani bodies that negotiate inter-provincial resource allocation and federal taxes. So much for no taxation without representation. Chairman, this is not a country, it's not a province, it's not a state, it is a satrapy. Were I not a British MP, conscious of the fact that much of this mess is a legacy of our colonial past in the region, I might almost describe it as a prize of war. But then, of course, that is precisely what Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is. Yesterday in this hall, we held a debate on religious persecution. Religious minorities in Pakistan have been systematically marginalized. Pakistan, whilst calling itself an Islamic republic, actually had a secular constitution in 1956. It was only after the ethnic civil war in 1971 that saw the division of the country and the secession of East Pakistan to form Bangladesh that Pakistan actually adopted Islam as its state religion under a new and less democratic and much less secular constitution. Stringent blasphemy laws mean that many religious groups face the death penalty if they're even accused of denigrating the Prophet, peace be upon him. Sadly, the infamous case of Asia Bibi is not unique, and the rights of women are, of course, governed by the Zina Enforcement of Hudud Ordinance of 1979, penal provisions which prevent women from exercising their marriage choices. The South Asian Terrorism Portal records that of the 42 identified terrorist training camps located in Pakistan, 21 were actually located in Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. These camps belong to three main terrorist groups, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Hizbul Mujahideen. One of the key areas around which the camps are located is Muzaffarabad, which is the capital of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. According to Human Rights Watch, the Pakistani government represses democratic freedoms, muzzles the press, and practices routine torture within Azad Jammu and Kashmir. And according to the World Press Freedom Index, prepared by Reporters Without Borders, Pakistan ranks 142nd out of the world's countries. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office's 2019 Human Rights and Democracy report noted that human rights situation continues to worsen and pointed out that freedom of expression and intimidation of journalists continues to be a serious problem. The report speaks of widespread intolerance, violence, and discrimination, and Pakistan is one of the countries of deterioration, as it is called by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Chairman, the situation has moved on, and despite further conflicts in 1965, the similar agreement was signed in 1972, whereby both countries committed to resolve all differences bilaterally and peacefully. That is what they should do, and it's what UK policy is and should be, to let them resolve their differences without political interference from either side. I deplore the way that some have always tried to import the conflicts of the subcontinent into our domestic politics. In my borough of Brent, our council leader is a fine and devout Muslim whose family is from Pakistan. Our chief whip is a wonderfully authoritative Bangladeshi woman, and our GLA representative is an enormously respected Hindu.
John Speller.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And can I firstly congratulate the member for Luton North for introducing this securing and introducing this debate and doing it so well. What I think is very noticeable is the way in which this is a cross-party assembly here, and we will be getting many views from all sides. And quite frankly, this is not a matter of left and right. This is a matter of right and wrong. Now, we're not against India. It's a huge country with an incredible history and also limitless potential. But that does not mean we should not hold the Indian government to account for its abusive behaviour, especially in Kashmir. And we also reject any argument that in Kashmir, the Punjab, or as with the Uyghurs in China, that these are internal matters and of no concern to those outside. Because human rights are actually a universal matter and a universal concern. And that was unambiguously established 75 years ago this week, just across the road when the United Nations had its first meeting of its Assembly and its Security Council. And Britain, of course, has a special place in raising this, not just because of our history, but also because of the concern of thousands of our constituents who are desperately worried about their families in Jammu and Kashmir. And it's been made even worse when communications are shut down and they have to spend weeks and sometimes months having no idea what has happened to their loved ones. And obviously that is a deep concern to them, and that's why it should be a deep concern to us. And can we be clear? The current crisis has been deliberately instigated by the Indian authorities with their rewriting of the long-standing constitution, which have been left by parties of different stripes in India before. And that's undermined the autonomy of Kashmir and also the change to property law to try and change the facts on the ground in Kashmir fundamentally by changing the population and therefore trying to secure a different outcome to a possible referendum. And then, facing understandable opposition, there was a dramatic and brutal shutdown of communications, beatings of individuals, shootings, including many well-attested cases of people being hit by birdshot and blinded as a consequence, arrests, disappearances, which I have to say was also an appalling feature of the crackdown in the Punjab after the assault on the Golden Temple, and many report that this is still going on. So bad was the situation that for quite a long time, opposition Indian politicians were denied the right to visit the area by the authorities. And yet, in spite of condemnation from around the world, oppression continues to this day. And we have the dangerous situation of two nuclear powers facing off and shooting against each other across the border. And that is a matter clearly not just of concern to those in the area, it should be of great concern to the international community as a potential threat to world peace and international order. Now, I hope the Minister, in his reply, because ministers before have indicated that they've raised these issues very strongly with Indian ministers, I hope he will acknowledge the suffering of the people of Kashmir and also his concern and tell us what the government is actually going to do to bring about peace and justice to this beautiful but troubled land, and peace of mind for its people, and also peace of mind for their families here in the United Kingdom.
It may help if to say after the next speaker, help people prepare after the next speaker, I'm going to have to reduce the time limit to 4 minutes. Sarah Brickliffe.
Davis, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm grateful to follow on for the honourable member for apologies for Worley. As a member of the all-party parliamentary group for Kashmir, we've worked proactively to promote human rights across all parts of Kashmir, and I travelled, as the honourable member for Bury South said, to Pakistan, and we went to the line of control, and I was able to witness firsthand what my constituents have been telling me for a long time, and these are truly heartbreaking stories to hear, Chair, and we do need to be doing all that we can to support them. I'll be very frank and honest, it was one of the most sobering experiences of my life, especially when we visited the refugee camp, and one of the moments that will stay with me forever was when we arrived. I had a man pulling at my arm for me to take notice of him, and he pulled up, it's quite difficult to talk about, but he pulled up his trouser leg and explained to me when he was tortured and they cut his leg off, and he showed me that. And then I had the women and children begging me, pulling at me, and again, my honourable member will confirm this because he saw that happening. They were desperate for my help, they were begging me, and that shouldn't be happening. We're in the 21st century, we need to be doing something about this. It's awful, and it has been for years. The citizens of the region have been living in the world's most militarised zone, with the fallout damaging the lives of men, women and children of Kashmir, with curfews, a ban on communication access, the closing of media outlets and widespread arrest of politicians and human rights activists. We've seen similar treatment before from authoritarian states, and let's be clear that today's oppression could get worse. As an advocate of the Kashmir region, I've been pleased by the human rights activism from charities like Amnesty International, and it was welcome that some progress has been made in recent months, especially regarding the communications blackout, but nevertheless the people of Kashmir should never have been placed under such strict rule. As many of you will know, over the past year the number of political and human rights detainees have increased into the thousands. What's more worrying is that these political and community leaders are not being offered a fair trial. Under the Public Safety Act, the court rules specify a 14-day time limit from lodging an application to the hearing. This process has not been followed, meaning there are people still in prison and with no prospect of a fair trial. This failure of the courts has become particularly urgent since a shocking wave of arrests in October of last year. And yesterday saw our government take a positive step in condemning the Chinese government's treatment of religious minorities, as UK businesses will face fines if their products are linked to forced labour in China's Xinjiang region. But more needs to be done, otherwise millions of Muslim people will continue to live in oppression, fearing for their constitutional freedom and ultimately for their own lives. And I'd just like to close by echoing the points already made. We need to remember that there are two nuclear powers involved in these tensions. This must become more of a concern to the international community, and we must make sure that we are doing all that we can to protect the fundamental human rights of the Kashmir people.
I can allow another 5-minute limit on this. Naz Shah.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you, under your chairmanship, and I also congratulate my honourable member from Luton North, South, for securing this debate. In 1945, the world set up the United Nations, and with peace, justice and international cooperation in mind. At the signing of the UN Charter, which was signed by 50 nations, including ours, President Truman famously said, "If we had had this charter a few years ago, and above all, the will to use it, millions now dead would be alive. If we should falter in the future in our will to use it, millions now living would surely die." Well, Chair, members across this House, and to those that will listen to my words after this debate, the Charter lives on today, but tragically, for the people of Kashmir, the will to use it doesn't. United Nations Security Council Resolution 47, providing the right of a plebiscite for the people of Kashmir, has existed since 1948. The will to implement still doesn't. 74 years on, the trajectory for the people of Kashmir is leading to a future far from a right of self-determination and closer to one of non-existence. But put history to one side for a second. In 2019, when India unilaterally revoked Article 370, removing the special status of Kashmir, outrightly defying United Nations resolutions, setting back previously agreed international resolutions like the similar agreement, arresting Kashmiri political leaders, enforcing curfews, implementing a media blackout, and denying internationally agreed principles of human rights for Kashmiri people. I ask this House, I ask our government, apart from the words of condemnation, what else did the people of Kashmir get? Since the start of 2019 siege, the Kashmiri people have been shut off from the entire world, occupied by over 600,000 Indian soldiers in the largest military occupation in the world. Kashmiri women are targeted for rape, 250 Kashmiris killed, 1,500 injured, 657 houses destroyed, 4,815 cordon and search operations during the past 1 year alone, political leaders under house arrest and being put through kangaroo courts. Thousands of non-Kashmiri Hindus of India have been issued domicile certificates, and the Indian government is proactively changing the very demographics of Kashmir, leading only to a path of ethnic cleansing of Kashmiri people. Minister, without the UN rapporteurs allowed into the region and every report out of the region being censored, how can anyone give this House any assurance that a genocide in Kashmir isn't actually taking place? From 2015 to last year, Britain has sold more than $500 million worth of arms to India, arms that will contribute to the blood of the Kashmiri people. Without the reassurances from the UN, we can't be sure we are not contributing to a genocide. And as a proud daughter of Kashmir, I simply ask the Minister, the Prime Minister has now cancelled his visit to India. Will he follow on and cancel the shipment of arms to India? We don't need international leaders and governments protesting with words. We have activists on the streets for that. We need international leaders and governments with the will to take action and stop genocides from taking place. The time to act is now. So, Minister, act now whilst there still is time, or history will not be so forgiving.
We can retain a 5-minute limit. Robbie Moore.
Thank you. and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Davies. And can I thank the Honourable Member for Luton North for securing this really important debate. And I'd like to say a huge thanks to all of my constituents that have contacted me specifically about this issue, as I know it sits very close to all of their hearts. Kashmir has been living under heavy lockdown restrictions since August 2019, following the special status of Jammu and Kashmir being revoked by India. And we should be clear about what these lockdowns actually mean. No foreign journalists are being allowed into Kashmir by the Indian government. Thousands of people have been arrested, face harassment and imprisonment without due cause. Lawyers, small business owners, journalists, students, and of course, human rights activists. Phone lines have been blocked and internet access has been taken away. And whilst some communication has been restored, it's patchy and heavily controlled by the government. Legal reforms have been made so that residents' property rights can be revoked. Properties have been destroyed and innocent people are losing their lives. It's reported that nearly 300 Kashmiris have been killed and over 1,600 injured and more than 900 houses destroyed since special status was revoked. This, quite rightly, is causing a huge amount